Okay, welcome back to the 144,000 Project, AngloIsrael.com. Our series is You Are God's, and you can see we just updated this a couple days ago. So I've added some things to the site, and we left off at video 8 on the YouTube channel, Rev9 Video. Okay, and filled in the blanks. So if you don't have this 6/11/2018, that's kind of why I started putting these on here, then you have a big chunk missing. I realize I missed a page or so of stuff, and I should have probably noticed that. I also wrote on here the acronyms. Now there's a full list on the first documents, and really that's kind of where you have to start. Jews versus Gentiles, New Testament quotes, and then the 55 videos were all done on that page. And now we're on You Are God's, explaining Christ in the book of Genesis. It's amazing. There's even some things there I had missed. So after going through it a few times, I still realized there was things I missed. So we were way down here. Let's see, we had done 28:12, so I kind of cleaned up some of this stuff, added a little bit more wording to make it better. 28:14 in Genesis, we had just kind of left off with that, mentioned about the God of Nahor, Abraham's, well, you know, and I think all the way up the line, like I say, your forefathers knew Christ. And if you look back, there's a reason probably why he chose Noah, and of course it says that he was perfect in his generations, which meant posterity, so he wasn't mixed with all the other people of the earth at that time, and probably knew the story of Christ from Enoch or someone else. So at any rate, so I've added that word, try to kind of clean that up. And then I added this chapter 29:30. So there's a number of things in there that we need to get. 32, 35, and then that brings us up to 35:11, which is right here, which is the thing we had before. So there's a nice little chunk in here in between that we really didn't get to. So, but I keep telling people, you know, I've had people kind of look at this. I had a talk to a pastor just the other day about this prophecy about this great Christian nation and Commonwealth, and that idea of the great nation and Commonwealth as it states it. I said, well, you know, that's not a blessing if this great nation and Commonwealth of nations that are obviously come from the posterity of Abraham, in other words, it's not a blessing unless they're Christian nations, and we only know one great Christian nation and one Commonwealth in the last 2,000 years, and we know the people you know, who took the message of Christ from the day Christ died. We can only point to one group of people in history that we know of that have taken that message from the time Christ walked here, went out, spread it all around to their kinsmen, and they didn't necessarily go to just any nation and try to convert every nation. That actually, I think, came a little bit later. I think if we look originally, we would see that most of the Anglo-Saxons went to other Anglo-Saxons. So I said, well, you know, of course they have to go out into all nations to find their kindred tribes or whatever, but I don't think we were so confused about what all this was until the last 100 years, really, until, you know, we tried to globalize the message, I guess you would call it. Started just saying, oh, anybody can be part of this now, because we don't know who this great Christian nation and Commonwealth of Christian nations that are blessed by Christ. We don't know who they are. So, at any rate, so he really couldn't argue that after we talked about it for a while, and that's what generally happens. People can't explain a lot of the things that I'm pointing out here. They just want to stick with church doctrine because that's what the church teaches, and then they're like, "Oh, well, you would be anti-Semitic." I said, "No, I am Shemitic. I'm explaining Christ, the same entity that the Jews were waiting on, and why they rejected him." Because I said it's obvious they rejected him. He couldn't fulfill these prophecies about the second coming, obviously, the first time he was here, which is what they were nailing him on. You know, what about this? What about that? Show us a sign. You know, because you were supposed to fulfill all these things we're waiting on, and he didn't explain to them that, oh, well, that's when I come the second time I'm going to fulfill all those things. Well, he didn't say that because there was prophecies about them rejecting him. Okay, and that's what most of the Bible is about, and it should be obvious. But when you go back and read, you know, start from Genesis and just go through the Old Testament, where do you see any of these prophecies speaking about people who are non-Israelites? I mean, if you look at the, you know, knowing Christ, in other words, because everybody knows, well, Christ is in Psalms, for example. And a lot of people know that that prophet that Moses spoke of was speaking about Christ. And they get the idea that that was Christ, the Spirit of Christ with them when they came out of Egypt, and the 12 tribes went across the desert, and all these things happened, all these miracles. Well, they get that that could be the Spirit of Christ, and of course Moses esteemed Christ, it says in the New Testament. We have a number of things, the rock was Christ, and all these things, which obviously come from the Old Testament, and for all the things that Christ did for them from when they came out of Egypt, in other words. And that was prophecy from before. So when you connect the dots, I was trying to get at this Commonwealth of Nations. Well, if you go back to chapter 12, it's just a expanding and defining the prophecy that started in chapter 12. And at a point there, eventually it goes into the nations being a multitude of nations, and then you get to the Commonwealth of Nations, and then you get to this prophecy in on Joseph in chapter 49 that's specific, saying that all that everything was passed to Jacob, passed to Joseph, through his two sons, and then they were just the heads of this great Christian nation and these commonwealths. So that's really all it boils down to. You just have to connect the dots on these prophecies, and we'll do a summary when we get to the end. Then you can just kind of see that, hey, it's one prophecy from Genesis 12 to the end of, you know, Genesis. It's all just one prophecy, which expands a little here, a little there. And you can clearly see it's prophecies to Sarah, and it's all one thing. It's not multiple things. All right, so I'm not sure what all I added, but at any rate, I'm just kind of looking at this wording. I wanted to mention, though, about this Christ the heir, and that's a quote to Deuteronomy plus Psalms about Christ the stumbling stone. So this stumbling stone is the biggest message in the New Testament as far as quoted verses about Christ, is actually about the people who would stumble over Christ. Which is what I was saying, this whole Old Testament, you have these people define this stumbling stone. That's Old Testament. You know, it just goes back to Psalms, it goes to, it quotes Psalms, it quotes Isaiah, it quotes a number of things. So you just, more on that, the people that rejected Christ and the ones that accepted him almost. And then chapter 119 is really, this is what's detailing the qualifications of the royal priesthood who obtained mercy. Well, yeah. Okay, Deuteronomy chapter 30 and 31 are the last words of Moses, and I mentioned about him saying about following God's law, that therefore choosing life, because that's what life comes from, following God's law. Okay, and then believing in that Spirit that brought you out of Egypt, that's the idea. And that life was promised to Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, as he states in 30:20, which comes through following God's law, which we saw that Abraham did. Yeah, we pointed that verse out Abraham followed his law, and that's how, Moses got it. And then the Redeemer was called the prophet in Deuteronomy 18:15, and that's heavily quoted in the New Testament. So, prophet was first promised to Abraham, okay, as the proper context of King Melchizedek. It's also in Acts, Galatians, Hebrews, and the other cross references. Okay, so all of these things that we learn about Christ in the New Testament are heavily quoted and cross-referenced back to the Old Testament, and now we're just looking at them in Genesis. So, if we were looking for believers in Melchizedek, Christ, in modern day, then we would look for the 12 or more nations in various parts of the earth that were part of the same posterity, held to the same basic beliefs about this king. These nations would also fit within the prophecies described in Scripture for the first coming and second coming of Christ. And then the last 200 years, I should say 2,000 years, another goof, okay. We can only point to one family whose posterity has printed Bibles in most every language, sent missionaries to the four corners of the earth to teach the gospel of the kingdom. They even taught to people whom it has no kindred family application, because that's what the Bible's about. It's about this one kindred family. That's what I was saying. You go through all the prophecies of the Old Testament, you don't see any prophecies about other nations embracing Christ or anything. He always says, and I've got that one topical chart, you can see everything it says on there about redemption, salvation, all this only applies to the 12 tribes when you go look up the verses. Never says anything about other people. Okay. So, Jacob's pillar stone. This is Genesis 28, 18 and 22, and this is this mention about 1 Corinthians 10:4, everybody knows, which we get the Christ the rock from. But this is the rock Moses tapped twice and got him and Aaron barred from going to the promised land. They both died on the other side. Okay, the stone was literally what he called it, Bethel, or the house of God. That's what Bethel means. And it contained the Spirit of God that Christ called the Helper. If you recall, before he was taken up, he said he would send the Helper, and then it called him a he and a him. Of course, that was the Spirit of Christ, who was sent to the Jews for Christ after his ascension. The place he saw Jacob's ladder he called the gate of heaven and Bethel. So the land, he called the rock Bethel, and he called the land or the place on the mountain where he was laying Bethel as well, which is still there today. So Jacob's pillar stone is both, and explains why we would call on the Spirit when in possession of this stone, and its use all through Scripture is in reference to Christ. Yeah. The Jacob's pillar stone is currently in possession of the Jews for Christ in Scotland. Oh, it's the Christian Israelites, though it previously resided under the coronation chair in England for hundreds of years, and kings were coronated on that chair with Jacob's pillar stone believed. Below, there's many pictures in Google you can find of the chair with the stone in its place underneath the seat. You can find individual pictures of the stone. Some of them are different, so we don't really know. But there's plenty of pictures. Everybody in England knows about the coronation chair and the stone. It's, not some vacuum over there about the knowledge of Jacob's pillar stone. Okay, so the 12 tribes got water as a stream from Jacob's pillar stone in their desert. And when Moses tapped it once, that's what he's told to do. So the statement of God watching over him so he has a safe return to his land, this is talking about Jacob, is the same concept of Christ the shield from Genesis 15:1. The vow to tithe 10% parallels Abraham's vow to the King of Righteousness. Okay, we're talking about Jacob here. If Moses and Aaron both came to an early end of life because of this rock, as the angel said to them in Deuteronomy 32:50-52, then that's another witness to its connection to Christ the rock, who is mentioned in chapter 32 multiple times, sums up in 33:27-29. In 34:4 and 10, this is Christ the prophet speaking to Moses face to face. Okay. And then the New Testament, it said Moses esteemed Christ. Again, we know this prophet in Deuteronomy 18:15 is quoted in the New Testament as connection to Christ. So we know the prophet was Christ. And when the Jews came to John and said, "Are you the prophet?" That's the prophet they're talking about. This Christ from, Deuteronomy. And generally, we all know that it goes back to at least Genesis 49:10. Most any pastor will explain that part about the scepter, the king coming from Judah. So I guess people have their own ideas, but the point is it's all right here. And when an angel calls himself God, which is or the God of the house of God, which is what Bethel means, and he's talking about Jacob's pillar stone, then that's So let's look at 2018. So I guess, let's see. Yeah, we kind of left off at 28:14. That was the last thing. And then in 15, be assured also that I am with you and will guard you wherever you go, give you a quiet return to this country. So that's Christ the shield speaking to him, of course. And it started out that's the part about Jacob's ladder. He saw the ever-living station above it. Who said, I am the ever-living God? Okay, so it's an angel standing at the top of the ladder. It says, I'm the ever-living God and the God of Isaac. Okay, and then he consecrates this stone after that. So, but we know it's Christ. He said, I'll guard you, give you a quiet return. In other words, I'll protect you the whole time. I will not forsake you until I've accomplished what I promised to you. That's 15. And that goes to Hebrews 13:15. So we go over to Hebrews. That's right at the end. And then, let's see. And story about 12. Consequently, Jesus, so that he might sanctify the people by his own blood, suffered outside the gate. Consequently, let us now go out to him, outside the walls, carrying his disgrace, for we have not a permanent city here. On the contrary, we were in search of a future one. This future one that they're in search of is New Jerusalem. After all these wars end and everything comes to an end, then he sets up New Jerusalem, and that's what we see at the end of Revelation. Okay. Let us therefore always offer through him a praiseworthy sacrifice to God, that is a lip fruit, confessing to his name. So we always call on his name, and that's what's going to happen at the end. He'll write the law on your heart, and then you'll be this kingdom priest or royal priesthood, which is described in Revelation and all throughout Scripture. Alright. But in 20, but the God of peace. Well, there you go. Prince of Peace. So I should have highlighted that. That's verse 20. Who brought back our Lord Christ from the dead, the great shepherd of the sheep, purify you with the blood of an eternal settlement, which is writing your law in your heart, redeeming 12 tribes and so forth, which was the promise. Started with Abraham. Oh, I like how it mentions down at the bottom, those of Italy send kind regards. Well, he's talking about 12 tribes, of course. And, why would you go to Italy? In other words, in Spain. Paul was going to go to Spain and Italy. Well, why? Because that's where their kindred tribes were. All throughout Europe. They went over there, and that's how a lot of that happened. Okay. They finally heard all about this. So, back where we were, to check this pillar stone here. This is 28. There's probably about 16. Ever living is certainly in this place, and I knew it not. So he was afraid and said, how terrible this place is, of course. Is not this truly the house of God? and this the gate of heaven. Obviously there's no house there. He's just laying on the ground with a rock for his head, right? It says Jacob slept until morning. Of course, you know, he saw these angels with Christ in that spot, so that's why he said that. When he took the stone which he placed for a pillow, set it upright, poured oil on top of it, and called the name of that place God's house. So the area, he just called it God's house because that's where he saw the angels. But Luz was its former name. Or it could say, some of them could say Andam Luz or Luz or something. Just depends on your Bible there. It mentions Luz some other places as well. So then Jacob vowed a vow: if the ever-living God is with me, and will guard in the way that I go. So exactly what it said before, that he would guard him or shield him. Giving me bread to eat and clothing to put on, bring me back safely to the house of my father, then the ever-living shall be my God. Of course, because that's what the ever-living God was promised. That's what Christ was promised to do. Shield him, be an exceeding great reward, right? This stone which I placed for a pillow, that's 22, shall be a house of God, and all that you gave to me I'll return a 10th part. Of course, he knew that from Abraham, because Abraham had respected this angel, which he called Melchizedek. Now he's so many years later, and he knows these stories about how this angel helped Abraham, and how it promised himself as a shield and would do these things for his posterity, and now he's part of this posterity, so he vows the same tithe that Abraham vowed back in chapter 14. Because it's the same God he's talking to, the same angel. And it's Christ, the shield, right? Okay, so let's see. Okay, so went all through that. And then that's the rock. It's not a huge rock. It probably weighs 300 or 400 pounds, something like that. So it has rings on it. You can see it has, if you go on the web and look it up, it has large rings on it. And we've already been through it on my chart. I've got a picture of it on my Rock Was Christ chart. I've been all through that. We've looked at pictures and all that. So just look at my videos and my chart on the Rock Was Christ. So we get down to, okay, there was the vow. So let's look at them in Deuteronomy 32. Of course, there's a lot about Christ in chapter 32. So 50 to 52 then. Let's see. Let's start up around 49. Go up the hill by the ford to Mount Nebo. Survey the land of Canaan, which I will give to the children of Israel for possession. You shall die upon the mountain that you ascend, be added to your people, as Aaron your brother died in the hill of hills, and was added to his people, because you did not exalt me among the children of Israel at Meribah of Kadesh in the desert of Zin, or Sin, where you did not sanctify my presence among the children of Israel. Therefore you shall survey the country near it, but you shall not enter in the country which I'll give to the sons of Israel. Okay, so that's talking, back up, that's talking about where he tapped the rock, and then he really didn't, you know, sanctify the rock and tell them that, hey, this is Christ going with you to be this shield and to fight for you, as he's done already, in other words. Give you water and do all these things for you and protect you from other people. So, at either rate, by tapping it twice in anger, I guess is what the whole thing is. Now, it sums up. In 33, 27, and 29. Yeah, there's 26. There's none like the God of Jeshurun, who rides on the heavens to your aid and floats on the heights of the clouds, which is what the idea was of the tornado. He had a tornado of fire and then a tornado of sand or darkness behind them. And then he shielded them from the sun with that tornado of sand, I guess, or clouds, either way. His God is above from old and beneath the eternal arms, who sweeps out the foe from your face. Okay, sweeps out the foe. So that's him as Christ the rock or Christ the shield, sweeping out of the way the people below, in front or behind you, or whoever is trying to attack you, or whoever is in your way, I guess. And gives the command to destroy. Well, that's Christ the rock when he gives this command to destroy people who are attempting to harm you. That's Christ the rock. Okay, and when he protects you, it's Christ the shield. Same idea. Israel dwells alone and secure. Well, they're secure because they have Christ. Jacob's spring in a land of corn, and his skies drop dews of wine. So it's talking about rain. Blessed Israel, who is like you, a victor race for Jehovah, for Christ. Okay, your shield, your help, and your sword. Well, there you go, right there. That's the whole idea. Your shield, your help, and your sword. Whole idea of Christ the stone, Christ the rock, Christ the scepter, in other words. You shall grow and subdue your foes and advance on their heels like a road. So he's given you power, and that's what Israel was. Power with God, right? So this is power with God, and this is the whole concept of you are gods. You are God's because Israel has this connection to God, which gives prophecy and then fulfills the prophecy. It says that he'll protect you, and then he does, and then sends you out and does all these things, fulfill these prophecies. You can't fulfill the prophecies on your own, so he has to help you along the way to fulfill the prophecies that he's already given you. That's why you're called gods. Okay? And that's all started at the beginning of chapter 12 with the prophecies about Abraham and his offspring, his future offspring. But that continues until the second coming. So, when Christ mentioned that in the New Testament, John 10:34, this is what he's talking about. It's all these prophecies starting in 12, well, and before, as we saw, that people before knew, even Noah and all that, and apparently Enoch, because he was taken up to heaven without death and all that, so they knew about the concept of Christ, this Spirit. They knew about it, and they called on the Spirit to help them. Prayed, so on. So 34, 4 and 10, this is Christ the prophet speaking to Moses face to face. Alright, 4 and 10. For the ever-living had said to him, this is the country that I promised to your fathers, to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, saying, I will give it to your race. Okay, so this is the same entity speaking to him here in 32. And of course, if you back up in 32, and just start at the beginning, does it really go back to 31? Well, I guess, yeah. Yeah, it starts at 32. Of course, the ever-living spoke to him before that, so you can look at it however you want. Talks about following his law, engraving the book of the law, and 31, all that. So, but in 32, that's where we use get this idea of Christ the rock. It's used multiple times. There's connections to the New Testament here about this. It mentions the rock, the rock, the rock, the shield. So all this is here in chapter 32. Then redeeming the 12 tribes and all that. So a lot of quotes here or cross references to the New Testament. So same entity. And he's talking to him. This is the country I promised to your fathers. So it's the same entity that spoke to Abraham, same entity that spoke to Isaac, same one that spoke to Jacob, saying, I will give it to your posterity, in other words. Look at your eyes, you shall not pass over it. Okay, which I just explained. And then in 10, 4 and 10, yeah, okay. Alright, so we get 9. Joshua the son of Nun was full of spirit and intelligent. Of course, he got that from this same entity, in other words, gave him this spirit and intelligence, because he was consecrated by Moses. So Moses had laid his hands upon him, so the children of Israel listened to him, Joshua in other words, and he acted as the ever-living had commanded to Moses. Alright, well, and then it says, I was looking at 10, 11, 12. There never, however, arose a prophet again in Israel like Moses. So Moses was called a prophet as well. Exactly, the same way that Abraham was called a prophet. Jacob was a prophet. That's the whole point. Christ is working within this family and their posterity. And they are the only ones that have true prophecies. And, we can have other false prophets, but that's not from Christ. And the whole idea when Moses asked him back there, and I guess it's right there in 18, let's probably look at that, but everybody should looked at this by now. Because he asked him, well, how do you know when there's a real prophet and a false prophet? Well, alright, so it's 18:15, Deuteronomy 18:15. That's where we get the prophet. Your ever-living God will raise up a prophet like me for you from among your brothers after me. So, a prophet like me, okay, Moses speaking about himself as a prophet from your brothers. So that's the whole idea of Christ coming from the 12 tribes. It was never prophesied to just come from whoever. Had to come from the 12 tribes. You all requested one from the ever-living God at Mount Oreb on the day of the public meeting, saying, we cannot continue to hear the voice of the ever-living God, no longer to see this great fire. Okay. And then the ever-living said, what they have said is good. I will raise for them from amongst their brothers one like you. Put words in his mouth, he shall report to them all that I command them. Which, speaking of Christ, if any man who will not listen to the messages which he delivers in my name, I will drive out from my people. Again, he says multiple times, he takes people out of the book of life that don't want anything to do with him. And he's talking about Israelites. He's not talking about the world rejecting Christ. The world doesn't know anything about Christ. They have no prophecies to them about Christ. They have no connection to Christ or his family. It was only this one family prophesied. But the prophet who shall presume to deliver a message, this is verse 20, in my name, which I have not commanded him to deliver, or who shall speak in the name of other gods, that prophet shall die. But perhaps you may say in your heart, how can I distinguish such a message as what the ever-living has not spoken? Verse 21. When the prophet delivered it in the name of the ever-living, although he was not commanded, okay, that was continuation. He says, when the event does not happen, then the ever-living has not spoken. That prophet has spoken it in his presumption, fear him not. He talks about the ever-living has destroyed. See, it says right there in 19, chapter 19, when the ever-living God has destroyed those heathen. So that's Christ the rock going in front of you, destroying the heathen. He helps you in war, but he really, just like we saw with Gideon didn't kill anybody. He just showed up and did what Christ told him to do. It was the Spirit of Christ that confused all the army that was there, and they killed each other. Gideon didn't kill them. His army didn't actually raise a sword against anyone. They all killed themselves. Again, Christ the rock. And you know all this about Christ the rock from Abraham. Alright, that's all you really need to look there. Alright, so chapter 29, 30. People think they don't know anything about Christ in the Old Testament. Of course they knew all about this Spirit that did these things, shielded them from harm. It's all right here. And we see Jacob sees these angels, calls it the house of God, and then he carries that rock around with him. They tapped it and got water out of it. And that was just one of many ways they got water, and I've explained that before. Alright, so chapter 29 and 30 then. We look back to Genesis, and then this is where the 12 tribes are born, in other words. This is where we get 30 verse 2, the fruit of your body, alright? So the multitude of nations to be blessed by the heir of Abraham, which is what we'd already studied, are born as prophesied. Okay, because they were a prophecy of his, that he would have these offspring, these multiple nations, or a commonwealth. The reason they're a commonwealth, because they're kindred tribes. They've always been kindred tribes, and always will be kindred tribes. If you violate his law, he just, like he just said, he just, takes you out of the book of life. That's your issue. But the ones that do try their best to follow his law and teach his word properly and do the right things, they stay in the book of life, and they're redeemed by Christ because they have a prophecy. And that's the hope of Abraham, the faith of Abraham, is holding on to this hope that you're going to be redeemed, not cast off with the rest of the nations of the world because of all the evil, right? There's multiple specific prophecies to each tribe in Genesis, Deuteronomy, etc., and throughout. There's specific prophecies, right? The meaning of their names are derived by various means, but my Bible only mentioned Jacob as the tripper up, Issachar as meaning wages, Zebulon as endowment, Joseph as increase, and their sister Dinah as justice. In 30 to 43, this is Christ the angel from 31:10 to 13 that's helping Jacob gain a large herd of sheep from the flock of Laban, because the angel calls himself God of the house of God. When you have an angel that calls himself God, especially of the house of God, which started with this vision of angels going up and down the ladder, that's the beginning of that idea right there. That refers back to 28:19, which we just looked at. Jacob's ladder, Jacob's pillar stone, right? It would be Christ, the same entity that appears to Laban in 31:24, warns him to deal fairly with Jacob. We don't have any change in entities going through. It's the same entity speaking to people and appearing to people. All right? Twice Christ tells Jacob to go back to the land of his birth in 31. All right, so let's just start here in 30, 34 to 43. Talking about these goats or whatever, sheep and goats. I wrote in here a large herd of sheep, because it does say sheep in another place. Okay, this is Christ the angel that's helping Jacob gain a large herd of sheep. Okay, so he had this vision basically of, let's see, I thought this was the vision. He had a vision of these sheep and goats from Christ. I thought 30:30 was that vision, but I guess, yeah, I guess it, alright, 30 to 43, alright, that goes in. Alright, well, this is where he makes this deal with Laban to get the spotted rams, goats, and so on, and sheep, black sheep. So then Jacob went out, he selected wands of willow, almond, and sycamore and peeled them, and then that's how he got them spotted. So, and of course, it was Christ that gave him this idea how to do this, which we'll see. Alright, so I read all that from 31:10 to 13, so we go to 31. Alright, It also happened in the season of the heat of the sheep that I raised my eyes in a dream. Okay, well there's the dream. So what he's doing back here then in 30:43 is what it mentions that he saw in this dream, which starts in 31:10-13. Raised my eyes, saw the rams leaping on the street, speckled and spotted sheep, and the angel of God said to me in the dream, Jacob. I replied, I am here. Then he said, lift up your eyes and see all the rams leaping on the streaked, speckled, and spotted sheep, for I have seen all that Laban has done to you. I am the God of the house of God. Wait a minute, it just said it was an angel. Now it says it's God. It's Christ. Another angel can call himself God and then do all these things, right? Saying that he did it, which you consecrated there in the pillar which you dedicated to me, where you vowed a gift. Speaking of the tithe, 10% tithe. So there you go. Go from this country and return to the country of your birth. So he tells him to go back to the country of his birth. Alright. Angel called himself God, referring back to Jacob's pillar stone, which is what we just read a minute ago. So it would be Christ, the same entity that appears to Laban in 31:24. Okay, so if you go farther up to 24, Jacob left with his wives, and Laban pursued him, came upon him at Mount Gilead, but God appeared to Laban in a dream at night. Guard yourself in what you do to Jacob, for either good or ill. Okay. And then he talks about this later. Christ tells Jacob to go back to the land of his birth in 31:3 and 13. Oh, okay. All right, we read the 31:3. Oh, we read the 13 actually. But if you back up 31:3, then the ever-living, same angel, in other words, said to Jacob, return to the land of your fathers and your birth, I will be with you. In other words, I'll be your shield. Which he already prayed about that, if he'll shield me on his travels, right? So, we got that one. So we continue on. We got that. And then Jacob gives us the biblical concept of a trial by a jury in 31:37. Yeah. So he said, Laban's caught him, searched all his stuff looking for his gods, Teraphim or whatever it calls them. Now you have searched all my goods, and what you found of the goods of your house, in other words, what did we steal it from you? Put it before my people and your people, and they shall decide. In other words, they'll be the judge. Right? It's a trial by jury. In other words, if I've done anything wrong, let's have a trial here. And where to get this idea of a trial by a jury? Of course, that was started with Abraham. Abraham was told to set up a justice system, and he had more than 1,000 people in his household back in chapter 14 when they went after Laban, to rescue Laban. That was executing justice. Okay, and he had already been told to set up a justice system. So, all right, Laban confirms it in verse 53 by calling on the God of Nahor to judge between them if necessary. Okay, so we go up to 53. Alright, well, this is the heap of evidences. You shall pass over to me in this pillar for evil, to do any evil against each other. In other words, the God of Abraham, the God of Nahor, judge between us, the God of our fathers. In other words, our forefathers, because Nahor is a forefather. So he's indicating that the God of their family goes way back. Yeah, it went back to, all these things all the way back to Noah and beyond were all because they were the same family. Of course, we have the genealogy, so it's not like we don't know that. Swore by the fear of Isaac. Yeah, he's speaking about Melchizedek, but that's this God of Nahor that he's talking about. That's the fear. That's the God that Jacob fears and Abraham feared and so forth. And Isaac, in other words. Just made the connection. Alright. So, it's speaking about, really speaking about Christ. We've already established that that's Christ, the shield and the stone and all that. So, talking about Christ, because back in verse 42, he connects the fear of God, fear to the God of Abraham, in other words, which we know is the Christ. It says it rebuked Laban in verse 24 and 29, right, which I just mentioned. This text is an excellent example of the whole concept of Christ the shield, but also Nahor is mentioned as knowing this same entity is a king of righteousness, prince of peace. I think we make a good argument all the way back to Adam. Yes, that's where it all started, because we have the genealogy back to Adam. So same family, even if there was only a few. Maybe when we got to Noah, there was only one, his family and his children, but he only needs one. Remember, same thing with Moses when Christ said they had done this golden calf. He said, well, don't kill them all and raise new children for me, and a new Israel, in other words, through me, and kill everybody else. Don't kill them. And Christ says, well, what is their sin to me? I'll just take them out of the book of life. So that's exactly the same thing Christ mentioned about these people who rejected him, that they would be taken out of the book of life. He goes back to the golden calf and the 40 years in the desert. He mentions those two things where he'd take them out of the book of life. So when we get to the New Testament, you got this group that were taking out of the book of life, and they're still claiming that they're waiting on this prophet. They rejected the first prophet and killed him, and they're still waiting on a new prophet, which I'm just trying to explain to them. That's this one. And they just need to accept this prophet, because there's not a new one. It's going to, when this prophet comes back, it's going to be the same prophet that was here before. Okay, I'm just trying to explain who their prophet is and why they rejected him, and they just need to, of course, if any of these people we're talking about really are members of the 12 tribes, we have to establish that fact first. So let's knock off here on video 9. We'll come back with video 10. Thanks.